All right, rock and roll. Welcome one, welcome all to the Scorched Earth Political Podcast. I am your host, John, and if you could, hit that like and subscribe button. It means a lot to us. Feel free to leave a comment. I personally respond to them all, trolls included. Hey, nothing like a little good fight to get you going for your day, right? And we do have a fight going on. The government shutdown is in full force. The Republicans aren't backing down. The Democrats aren't backing down. Obviously, we look at the overwhelming idea of the Republicans control all the levers of Congress, the Senate, and the White House. They don't need one Democrat vote, but let's not use facts here too much. There's a couple different ways I really want to look at this, and we all know that Donald Trump is petty and vindictive. It's like he was abused as a child and he's trying to take it out on everybody else he encounters the rest of his life. And if you flatter him, if you butter him up, if you give him goods, frankincense and myrrh, then I guess you fall inside the little golden circle. Well, obviously the Democrats are trying to do something to fight. We don't have many ways we can fight. The shutdown is literally, we need to extend the ACA credits. It's going to cost about $30 billion. Of course, how much does Trump spend on giving to Argentina? About the same. Okay, so let me see. We can extend ACA for all of America for about the same as we gave to that guy down in Argentina who's destroying his economy. Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, John. But we're going to go into the government shutdown quite a bit here. First of all, I want to talk about, like I said, the pettiness of this man. And when the government shutdown went down, he immediately lashed out at Democrats. And he said, quote unquote here, a lot of good can come from the shutdown. We get rid of a lot of things we don't want, and they will be Democrat things. And then immediately he shut down an $18 billion infrastructure project in New York City. He shut down a couple other things in New Jersey, Maryland, places like that. Not of that scope, but they were projects like that. And it made me think about how we've evolved as a country and what we look for in our leaders. And I harken back to the 2021 era. God, we miss you, Joe Biden, more and more every day. That he was trying to pass the infrastructure bill, and the Democrats were all for it. The Republicans were adamantly against it. They did not want anything good to happen to America. They did not want to rebuild roads. They did not want to rebuild bridges. And because then deficit spending was a bad thing until we got to the big, beautiful bill. And then it's no problem. I don't see anything. It's all good, right? But Joe Biden went through about 6 months of excruciating pain. Joe Manchin didn't make it easy. Kristen Sinema from Arizona didn't make it easy, but he got it through because he was a true politician. He figured it out. And when they finally got the bill, there's 1.8 trillion, I believe, that they decided, how are we going to allocate this money? You know, I think there was huge amounts of money for internet, bridges, roads, electric vehicle stations, things like electric charging stations, things like that. And I remember in an interview when it was all finally parsed out by the great Pete Buttigieg that 60% of the money in that bill went to red states. And they simply asked Joe Biden, you know, they fought you so hard, they fought you so viciously, they did all kinds of things. Why are you giving a majority of this bill to the Republican states? And he simply said they're Americans and they need it. And I was so touched by that. I was like, wow, there is a man who cares about his country more than his political power. And we can see the exact opposite with Donald Trump. He doesn't care about the country. All he cares about is the political power that he can wield for his friends and against his enemies. And it is disgusting and it is sick. And I count the days till that guy is out of here. Either by death, by impairment, by the 22nd Amendment, or just it's time to go. Because you know what? He embodies the worst of America. He only cares about himself and his own aggrandization. And Aggrandizing, I guess, would probably be a better form of that word. Hey, I'm more than a pretty face, but I didn't do that well in English, right? Don't quiz me on what iambic pentameter is, right? So we're going down the loop, and as the government shutdown goes, of course, we think, well, maybe he's going to stop this illegality. Well, no, he just ramps it up another notch. In 1939, the United States passed a law. It's called the Hatch Act, and it's basically that the executive branch of government cannot wield power to politicize anything that goes on. They cannot send emails, or phone calls, or flyers, or whatever, to all the federal government employees of, hey, vote for me or I'm going to fire you. Well, Donald Trump crossed that Rubicon. At midnight, when the government shutdown went into effect, immediately the executive branch sent out emails to all the federal employees blaming the Democrats for the shutdown, right? So let's politicize it as much as we can. Maybe if we're lucky, there's a link in there that we can go for Trump 2028 political fundraising too, right? The HUD department on their website blamed the radical left. A government website blamed a political party. Really? Not the Republicans, it's them. Third thing I'm going to talk about this government shutdown, and I wish somebody would bring this up in the press, because believe me, I scour the press. I read 60 articles a day. I watch numerous podcasts. Nobody is talking about this. In 2024, when he was running for president, I counted at least 4 times when Donald Trump told a crowd he was going to balance the budget in his first year. Okay, you can see where this is going. So let's go to January, when he put Elon Musk and his Doge fascist in, basically not to save money, but just to basically destroy the infrastructure to provide services for Americans. He did that, and in February 19th of 2025, Donald Trump said balanced budget in a post on Truth Social. Like, wow. Now, fast forward, we know how this story all ends out. Yeah, and we also know who Luke Skywalker's dad is, right? That in the big beautiful bill, he continued the tax cuts, which exacerbated the deficit, right? Basically, without getting too boring and too mundane, the government brings in about anywhere between $5.2 and $5.4 trillion. We spend somewhere around $7 trillion. So every year there's a $1.6 trillion deficit. Now, what happens is they fund the government for what they have, $5 trillion, and then when it runs out, like in October, then they have to do stopgap. They have to put out bonds, sell them to foreigners or whomever will buy them, and that's how they bridge it until the next budget. And they basically play this little circular merry-go-round game. But most economists thought, or think, I haven't seen the CBO, so I'm not going to lie to that, but most economists say that if he would have restored the tax rates before the big tax cut of 2017, going up 3% for those who make over $400,000 a year, going up 5% for those who make over $10 million a year, it would have bridged that $1.5 trillion gap. Okay? Allah, we wouldn't have had a shutdown on October 1st because we would have had a neutral deficit. We wouldn't have had a deficit. We would have had enough money to fund our government. Now, let's go back in time. Who's the last person to balance the budget? That would be a Democrat, Bill Clinton. Who was the last 2 people to bring down the deficit in their term? That would be Barack Obama. That would be Joe Biden. Yes, Joe Biden was saddled with huge deficits in 21 and 22 because of the COVID Relief Act, but actually in 24, he was actually bringing it down about 12%. Barack Obama was really doing a great job after he got saddled with that mess that George Bush handed off to him in 2008, and actually at the end, he was bringing it down about 8-9% a year. I mean, he was doing some work. God, we miss you, Barack Obama. And believe me, if Donald Trump can run for a 3rd term, I'm hoping you can too. But let's move on. So, Donald Trump on Monday of this week signed an executive order. And God, I'm fascinated by this. He's the president. He has the Senate. He has Congress. He has the Supreme Court. Why can't he just pass laws? Why has everything got to be an executive order? And then it goes to the courts and gets bottled up. You know, I think a law means something. Oh, wait, unless Joe Biden and the Senate bipartisanly pass the TikTok thing, and then somehow he just basically circumvents. And that's really something we should talk about, that they sold TikTok for $14 billion to all his buddies, all the people who raised money for him in the 2024 political campaign. But the valuation of it is somewhere close to $75 to $100 billion on the open market. Why didn't they just put it out for bid? I thought we were a capitalist society. I thought we weren't just going to give it to Larry Ellison, Mark Andreessen, all his little buddies. Hello? I guess capitalism only exists when it works for them, right? So this week he signed an executive order. Now he's going to defend Qatar. Qatar. Please, if you're going to leave a comment on it, I already know what you're going to say, okay? Qatar, whatever. You say potato, I say potato. And what he's saying is we are going to defend them. If anybody attacks them, we are going to consider that an assault on the United States. Now, we have this kind of agreement with NATO. Of course, he doesn't really enforce that because he's not helping Ukraine one iota. But that's basically the premise of NATO. If somebody attacks a NATO country, everybody responds as if it was an attack on them, right? So now we're putting Qatar under our umbrella, right? Think about this. We're risking American lives. He did not get Congress or the Senate to agree to this. This is basically a treaty, right? And usually treaties get approved by congressionals, by people in Congress, right? Well, he didn't do this. And now he's putting knives on the line. Now, think about this. What about enemies in the Middle East? Iran, the Taliban in Afghanistan, Yemen, the Houthis attacking Qatar. Are we going to war? And shouldn't we actually have some type of congressional approval for this before we step into this sticky wicket? This is the guy who said, I'm going to get everybody out of every war. Of course, in his first term, he promised to get out of Afghanistan, and he left that for Joe Biden. The problem with Joe Biden is he's actually a man of his word, and he actually got us out, and actually politically it hurt him. But at the end of the day, Joe Biden could look in the mirror and know he was a man. That's not something Donald Trump will ever in this lifetime be able to do, because he's a wussy on a wussy on a wussy. But my question is, Israel did an airstrike on Qatar 2 weeks ago. So we're on Israel's side on one part of it, we're on Qatar's side on the other of it. Whose side are we really on? I mean, if Israel does another strike on Qatar, are we attacking Israel? Does Israel become our enemy? I don't know. And obviously these are deeper questions that would be typically discussed in a truly competent administration, but we don't have that. We're 3.5 years away from getting that, whoever that is. Gavin Newsom, I don't know who that is coming down the line. But also, an interesting thing happened was Donald Trump Monday was touting that with Benjamin Netanyahu in the White House that we were going to come to an agreement on a peace deal real quick. And then now the Arabs are saying, that's Qatar, the UAE, and Egypt are basically saying, well, they're changing the goalposts. They're changing the deal. And it's like, wow, that Middle East, Donald Trump came in and said he was going to solve that Ukraine war in 24 hours. He couldn't do it in 240 years if he had the time, because he doesn't have the brains. He doesn't have the acumen. He doesn't have the morality to understand what he's dealing with. It's all champagne and cigars for this guy. When you have to get down to real diplomacy, this guy doesn't have a goddamn clue what's going on. Also, I want to wrap up. On Tuesday, he addressed 800 military leaders in Quantico, Virginia. And it was his I want to be a man speech, trying to elevate himself. And it was eerily quiet. I don't know if you heard it, but there's something that goes on that I wish the media could push back on it. And look, I understand the media disreports. Okay, you want political commentary, you come to Scorched Earth, right? But he keeps telling us that Chicago and Portland are war zones, right? And I looked it up. This year, Portland has had 37 murders. And that's a number, okay? Do I wish it was less? Absolutely. Could it be a lot more? Hell yeah. Actually, the murder rate has come down 40% in the last year and a half in Portland. Well done. Thank God Joe Biden was here for a year of it, but let's move on. Tuesday, in Gaza, Israeli soldiers killed 36 Palestinians. 12 more died from starvation. So that gets you a grand total of 48. My question to you is, sincerely and honestly, if somebody said you have to walk 12 blocks, would you walk in Portland or would you walk in Gaza? A real war zone. Would you walk in Chicago or would you go to Ukraine? I can tell you where I'm going, and I think everybody out there, I think everybody in civilization would be in the American cities. Look, I've worked in LA. I've worked in the darkest parts of LA where there is crime, there's corruption, whatever. I've walked on the streets. I've walked down to the liquor store to get a Coke. We don't live in that fear. We're not dodging bullets. We're not trying to escape drone attacks. That's what happens in a war zone. And Donald Trump compares those two cities to World War II. This is a guy with bone spurs who didn't go in, who thinks he's tough. You know, Pig Hegseth is making fun of the generals, talking about them being fat. And I'm thinking, look 3 feet to your left. Look at that bozo. Look at that fat walrus. His name is Donald Trump. He's got orange hair, but he's a walrus. You know? Sometimes when you speak out, when you cast aspersions, maybe you ought to look in the mirror first and be able to equivocally look in an honest way at who and what you are before you start to demean and diminish other people without any facts, without any substance. And that's what this administration's all about. It's all hot air and propaganda because all they care about is political power and not one damn part about American democracy or its people. Here at Scorched Earth, we believe in you. We are all in this together. I love you. We're going to win. If you could, hit that like and subscribe button, leave a comment, and we'll see you soon on the Scorched Earth Political Podcast.